KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger, a public affairs program featuring stories from all over the Central Valley with Sevag Tateosian, 90.7 KFSR.
I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Welcome to the Central Valley Ledger. We're recording from the downtown Fresno studios of the Community Media Access Collaborative of Fresno and Clovis with our guest, Keith Bergthold. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Your current role is Executive Director of the Fresno Metro Ministries, correct?
Yes.
But before we talk about that, some people also know you from the city of Fresno. Tell us a little bit about what you did then.
I spent about 7 years before coming to Metro with the City of Fresno Planning and Inspection Department. Actually, it was the Department of Resource Management, Development Resource Management. They changed the name while I was there. I was the Assistant Director for Advanced Planning.
How important is it for community members to be involved in the planning process? I mean, some people may think, okay, you know, I take my plans, they get approved, but is the community invited, an important role of the planning process?
You know, Sevag, there's been an evolution of understanding about community engagement. I'm kind of a community person and have done a lot of work with community development and community organizing. So for me, the planning process doesn't work unless it fully engages the community. Historically in Fresno, a lot of the community engagement was just a public notice, you know, come out to a meeting, and not very many people showed up. So we really focused on going out and outreaching like a nonprofit would to groups and leaders and things to inform them about what was going on, so we'd increase the number of people that were aware and could give input into the shaping of the plans.
How successful was that? Because my experience has been people are kind of reserved, or maybe reserved is not the good term, but kind of don't get involved in the process, and so it's tough to get them engaged. What would you say about that?
Well, I mean, it depends on the effort you make. I was the project manager for the 2035 general plan update, and so we had a lot of hurdles, technical hurdles, financing hurdles, because the city was, almost broke. A number of things were happening at the same time, but we made it a considered effort to develop materials that would actually be interesting to people, to engage them. And when you say how did it work, I think we counted about 4,000 people that we touched during the process with different types of public meetings, et cetera. And then in one of the most critical hearings on the new general plan, I think there were about 350 people that we got to come to the council chambers to actually speak to this. About 85 to 90 people actually spoke because they'd been informed about the process, and they were able to relate their interests to the planning process. So it's a lot of education.
Some people may think if they speak, nobody will listen to them. It'll just be a waste of time. Tell us about your experience with that, because it sounds like with that many people, their voices were heard.
Well, I think this was in 2012, and I think a lot of people were very impressed with how strongly the council did hear them, because they were very well informed speakers, so to say. I think that a lot of it has to do with how you prepare. Some people react to issues in planning rather than being involved in sort of a strategic way, proactive way in advance of some of the issues. And I think a lot of times you have to be visiting with the councilman or your board of supervisors individually. You have to let them know about some of your interests, your perspectives. I mean, it really needs to be organized. And I think the better organized it is, the more influence that a community group can have.
And then prior to that, where I met you or worked with you is Abundant Community, because I went to a conference that you were involved in. Could you tell us about that conference? It was 2011. You refreshed my recollection on that.
November 2011. I actually did this in my spare time while I was the assistant planning director. I worked with a number of community groups, and we invited John McKnight and Peter Block. They had just written a book called The Abundant Community, and we invited them to Fresno, and we put about 800 people at the New Harvest Community Church out in Clovis.
I remember I was one of those people.
And actually the way we organized that was fairly intentional. I helped find 80 people who were willing to bring another 9 people with them for a reduced price. So we raised a lot of donations from big sponsors. And if you came by yourself, it was going to cost you like $50, but if you brought 9 other people, it was just $10 a piece. And I had 80 people literally bring 800 total people.
What was the point of that project or conference?
It was to help people kind of get in touch with the power of community when it's perceived correctly. A lot of our communities are organized around deficits and deficiencies and what's missing. And I should say they're not really organized. They are labeled as, deficits, deficiencies, and what's missing. The abundant community philosophy and principles and practices are that people are assets, that people have gifts that they were born with, skills they've learned since they were born, they have passions and knowledge that they can contribute to the improvement of their communities. And so you can actually build on assets, you can't build on deficits.
So somehow you make it to Fresno Metro Ministry. Could you tell us how that worked out?
Well, I've been there a little over 2.5 years, and Metro Ministry is a wonderful organization with a wonderful history. It was founded in 1970 by a number of churches that were kind of leaving downtown to participate in the, I call it the race to the river. And I think they're very concerned about the social and economic and environmental issues they were leaving behind. It was also a couple of years after the Fresno Council of Churches failed. It actually disbanded. And so it was sort of an ecumenical move, create Fresno Metro Ministries to actually do some of the work and work with people who were struggling and disadvantaged in a number of different ways. It's gone through iterations. I mean, it's had a number of different leaders, civil rights orientation, community organizing orientation. It's had a health equity orientation under Walt Perry, which was marvelous. I think Walt did a wonderful job. There's been some transitional leadership. When I came, I said I really would like to do community economic development. I would really like to do things that we can measure, like create jobs in businesses, like move thousands of pounds of food into the right areas and things of that nature. So we have two main projects. One's called Food to Share, which is a fairly intricate food recovery program, and I can tell more about that. And then we have a place-based initiative called Better Blackstone, and we've adopted the Blackstone Corridor as a place to do neighborhood revitalization.
Why is it you do what you do? I mean, why should we care? Let's say that I'm busy, I work my day job, I go home, and I've got my family. Why should I care about the community around me? I mean, what difference does it make to me? A lot of times when I come home, we're sitting in the front, in the house or in the backyard. I'm not even seeing my community.
I wish I could show you a map. It's a map that I have put into the front of the new general plan. It's a map of Fresno. In 1945, at the end of World War II, it was just a very small blue area kind of surrounding downtown a little bit. And then since then you've had this expansion about 9 to 10 times the geographic footprint as we did the suburban expansion. And then I show people a map of poverty in Fresno. And guess what? This area is like 2 or 3 times bigger than the Fresno in 1945 that's heavy poverty, 40% or greater. And it's really us leaving folks behind. Well, at some point it's growing, and it's been growing for 60 or 70 years. You can't really escape it. At some point it will defeat Fresno. People won't want to invest in Fresno. It won't be socially viable, it won't be economically viable. Everybody should really care about the city the way it is and the people that live here, because we really want a strong area for health and safety, viability, investment, everything.
Tell us a little bit about what the mission is of the organization now. What is the kind of direction that you're going? And you touched on it a little bit a few minutes ago.
I came, I think the staff and the board had a fairly good idea of a vision. I'm just not sure exactly that there was agreement on how to get to that vision. And there was a lot of social justice words and economic justice and equity, which I'm very much in favor of. But that wasn't necessarily getting us a good audience. This is a fairly conservative valley and a fairly conservative town. So I said, what's it look like, when you actually achieve social justice and equity? And they actually responded promptly and said, it's healthy people in healthy places. I said, well, great, healthy people in healthy places. Let's make that the vision. And then we added some words to come up with a mission vision, and they're really kind of a formula for our work now. Learning, connecting, and engaging to achieve healthy people and healthy places is the mission vision of Metro Ministry, and we adopted that about 2.5 years ago.
Healthy people, how do you define that? I mean, it could be as broad as anything.
It's pretty easy in a lot of ways.
And I'm instigating, by the way.
No, this is good. I think that, Fresno, especially central Fresno, is demonstrably not healthy. We've got a number of measurements from the state. There's one thing called CalEnviroScreen, which has a measurement of socioeconomic characteristics and poverty that's mixed with environmental hazard. And central Fresno, where we're working along Blackstone, is the worst 15% in the state of California.
Interesting.
So we can look at chronic disease profiles, we can look at mortality and morbidity, we can look at the prevalence of good infrastructure, public spaces and access. And really the center of Fresno is not a very healthy place when you compare it to North Fresno or cities outside the valley, that sort of thing. So I think there's lots of ways to measure health.
When you're engaging people on the ground in these communities, are you finding that they want, they just need that push to get them active, or is this hesitation or resistance to you and your organization trying to get them to be involved?
You know, there's a lot of resistance, of course, but it's the way you approach people. Again, we have an ABCD, or an asset-based community development approach, one that is about abundance and gifts. And so we have people that are community builders that go out and talk to people to find out who are they and what do they want and what kinds of values do they have, and really begin to discern, are there latent leaders that have been sort of isolated in maybe bad neighborhoods, who really, when they start to get together and they learn some skills about how to run a meeting, how to set objectives and goals, how to respectfully engage their city councilman or a city department over something they might need, whether it's safety or a street light or a park or whatever it is, and they become more skillful at actually participating in the public space, that creates a sense of competence. And that competence begins to grow, and it really feels good to be competent, right? And I think that's part of the theory of asset-based community development, is that a lot of our human and social service systems, these trillions of dollars we spend, have literally kind of taken the place of individual competence and ability to be efficacious, to be effective in our lives. And so we're finding a lot of people that they're craving that. They would like to learn skills that help them be more effective in their lives.
What's the first step for getting a community active? In my neighborhood, there's several of us that get together. We have barbecues during Christmas. We have a feast. During Thanksgiving, we have a feast. During Halloween, we'll probably be out there giving candy, several of us together. So our community is active, but it's not at the next level where we're advocating for something at city council or we're having meetings. I think we're going the right way, but what's next in your opinion?
Well, I think where you start is what we call a learning conversation. Sevag, you might go out and over a period of, say, a month, you're going to go visit one person in your neighborhood you don't know, maybe once a week, and you have an hour conversation. You find out about who they are, their background, their goals, their desires, their family, things that trouble them in a neighborhood. And you kind of catalog that, sort of a map. And let's say you do that 4 times in a month, and maybe there's 3 or 4 other people in your group that do that. You've just contacted 16 to 20 people you didn't know, and you might find that 5 or 6 of them would like to join you in forming some sort of a leadership group for your neighborhood. At some point, you've got some critical mass. It could be 10 or 20 people, and then you have a conversation. Well, what would we like to do together? What kinds of issues would we like to
Now that we're here, now what?
Exactly, and you have a conversation about, are there some priorities we'd like to take on? And if you decide there's a priority, maybe it's, maybe you do need a park, or maybe you need to have a better relationship with your school. You start to do some research together. What would it take to have a better relationship? What would it take to have a park? And then you decide, do we want to have an action plan to do that? Is there a possibility, feasible possibility? It's just an iterative growth and developmental process, but it starts out with individual learning conversations, and then you teach other people you meet to do those. If you have 1,000 people that live in your neighborhood, over some reasonable period of time, if you had 20 people, you could actually do 100 learning conversations, 200. You may find some incredibly talented people who were just hidden, and I have a story to tell you about that.
And tell us the story, because now I'm dying to hear it.
Well, this is in Cincinnati, Ohio, and this is about 10 years ago. It's when everything's crunching down and school districts are canceling out their arts and music programs. And there's a bunch of parents that met at a school after the school district had eliminated the budgets for arts and music. They said, what are we going to do? Woe are us. We don't know what we're going to do to figure out how to have this for our kids, because we know it's important. And one of the bright ones in the group said, well, I wonder if anyone in the neighborhood around the school has the gifts and skills of teaching music or art. They said, that's an interesting question. How would we find out? They started going door to door, and they went out 8 blocks. This is actually a square block kind of neighborhood. They went out 8 blocks in every direction from the school. And guess what? They found 3 times as many people as they needed to volunteer to reinstitute the arts and music programs at that school.
Wow, so that's an
asset-based.
story.
That's an actual asset-based community development story.
Is this what you call grassroots effort?
Sure.
Now, I want to talk about Blackstone Avenue, because your organization's very involved in Blackstone Avenue. First of all, there's a bus or something going through. There's some construction on a bus.
The city of Fresno is launching bus rapid transit. They're building the pads in front of new little station stops.
Is that a good thing in your opinion for your organization?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes, and I was an advocate for it while I was at the city. These will be 10-minute buses. They'll be specially painted. They'll have a special brand. And between 5:30 in the morning and 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday, every 10 minutes a bus will come by. That regularity, that frequency gives people a lot of freedom to use the bus system that they don't have right now. And in other cities, we've seen that kind of frequency begin to create investment in land uses alongside those station stops or those platforms where these things are being built, where things happen that wouldn't have happened that are transit oriented. And that begins to reduce the number of trips on the street. For automobiles, it reduces greenhouse gases. It starts to increase a lot of walking and pedestrian activity related to busing. It's really a good thing. And there's some terrific stories about this in Portland, Oregon. Cleveland, Ohio has an amazing BRT system.
some people may say, why Blackstone Avenue? It's not the best area where it starts in downtown, but it goes up to River Park. Explain what the thought process is of starting where it did and ending where it did. And it might be tied to funding.
Well, I think that, number one, people don't know that Fresno has one of the most intensely used bus systems in the United States.
Oh,
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really quite a secret, and I think the facts should tell the story more, and they're really good at telling it anyway, but it really is a very well-used bus system on special routes, especially, and two of those routes are Ventura, Kings Canyon, and Blackstone. And so as the city, over the last 10 years or more, when they started planning out this BRT and competing for grants, this is all federally funded bus system to launch. They realized that that's maybe where they should launch these things. We chose Blackstone as a corridor that literally is the spine of Fresno. Figuratively and literally, spatially, it's the spine of Fresno. And one of our thoughts about this is that if the spine's starting to decay, and there's a lot of urban decay along Blackstone, empty businesses, some neighborhoods that are struggling and have some challenges. If the spine of Fresno is unhealthy, how long will the body be healthy? So we really want to invest where we're seeing this public infrastructure investment. We really want to build off that so it's a good investment. In Portland, I think they have had $5 of private investment for every dollar of public investment. Cleveland's over $100 of private investment for every dollar of public investment.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I don't know what Fresno's going to get, but the idea is if it's done well and there's a lot of people trying to encourage a land use response, more intensity, more interesting residential mixed with offices and retail, this could really be a very exponential investment thesis over a reasonable period of time.
Sustainability, is that looked into at all? Is this thing sustainable?
You're talking about bus rapid transit?
Yes.
I think the city had to make some choices about how they develop the system, and it's always going to be contingent on the city's willingness, right, to support those routes. So you've got tax dollars, you've got fares, you've got a combination of funding types, right, that go into it. When you hop on a bus and you pay a fare, that's only a small part of what it costs to operate the system. So the city gets grants, the city has tax revenue. There's a lot of things that go into maintaining an excellent public transit system.
So ideally speaking, where the route is of this bus on Blackstone, you're going to see increase in property values? Are you looking at it as a revenue generating type of thing?
I think what we're looking at is the idea that Blackstone, even without BRT, should be a good area for investing longer term if we see intensification. The general plan called for mixed use zoning along Blackstone, along Ventura Kings Canyon, and along Shaw. And so there are opportunities for people to do things with their property that were never allowed to do by right until this new general plan and development code were adopted. The general plan was adopted in 2014, December. New development code, I think, was approved in late 15, took effect in early 16. And we're educating property owners about some of the options and opportunities they have they never had before. They would have had to struggle through a very laborious and complex regulatory approval process for innovative development. Right now, it's allowed by the code.
So now that this bus is going in, this bus rapid transit is going in on Blackstone, Fresno Metro Ministry, what is your role now? Are you engaging the residents along the route? Are you working with the city? Where do you fit in this?
Well, we're trying to work with everybody, but you have to have sort of a theory of change. So Better Blackstone is two things. It's an association that we're trying to build of businesses and property owners along the commercial part of the corridor, neighborhood leaders in the 9 or 10 neighborhoods along the corridor from Divisadero up towards Herndon, and then the institutions. We have some grand institutions, and we've adopted a footprint a half mile either side of Blackstone, Divisadero up to Audubon, which is roughly where the BRT is. and there's about 50,000 people and 2,100 businesses. So over time, we would like to have a cross-sector or multi-sector association that really is working together, but not just along the whole corridor, but rather really in their little segments. So think about Blackstone between Divisadero and Highway 180. You've got Community Regional Medical Center. You've got the adult school. You've got a number of businesses along there. You've got the Lowell Neighborhood Association that's already starting to do some great stuff. You've got Yacomie and Jefferson. Between 180 and Olive, roughly, you've got the Susan B. Anthony neighborhood, and there's some work being done there by Every Neighborhood Partnership and by Metro to work with some property owners as well as the residents there to get some ideas about how they can help improve. There's probably 8 or 9 distinct segments. For us, part of the strategy of the association is to focus on what we call activity centers or nodes. And there's 4 principal nodal areas that we think have a lot of potential, pretty consistent with the general plan. One is at Blackstone and Shaw. One is around Manchester Center. One is around Fresno City College, and then another one around Olive. All those have potential to intensify and become places. Right now, they're not necessarily places. Manchester's going through a renaissance. That investment might drive some other investments, so we're going to try and help a number of property owners come together as well as the neighborhoods around that. Fresno City College, what an untapped resource. 24,000 students a week go through there. There's no place really for them to eat and be served, no place to work, no place to live. And that could all happen right around that corridor segment. Blackstone and Shaw is a diamond in the rough. What an opportunity. There's lots of vacant land that still has not been developed around Blackstone and Shaw on 41. That could be an amazing place. As these begin to intensify, they could drive investment, and then the places in between might start to align with one of the nodes or another one. So it's a long-term developmental.
It's going to take a while.
No, it's taken 60 years for it to go down. It's going to take a little while to get it back up, right? But you have to have a strategy, and these kinds of strategies have worked in other cities. So what Metro's really done is we've helped create this thing called Better Blackstone. There is an emerging association of different people who have interest in Blackstone. And then we've also founded the Better Blackstone Community Development Corporation. And that is a corporation that will be populated on its board by people along Blackstone who have an interest in seeing this revitalization. And it can actually partake in physical development and economic development initiatives. So we've got a couple of things going on there. And the fundamental core is building relationships among people along the corridor in places that they can identify with and they can have goals with that don't know each other. And we're finding that a lot of people are interested in that. And you spoke to that earlier. I'm surprised. We've had lots of breakfasts, lots of meetings, and as people begin to meet each other, they find they have some common goals, they have some common concerns, and they're willing to start to work with each other.
When you talk about that and the associations and the neighborhoods getting involved, the first thing that comes into my mind is democracy. I mean, this is
Amen.
This is people on the ground getting involved in their government. This is a good thing in your vision.
Our vision. I think I share this. We spoke briefly about it. I feel like the public sector is very well organized and reasonably well financed through tax dollars. The market or the business sector is very well organized around the profit motive and innovation and skills at building businesses and making profits. The civic sector and the community sector is not organized. And it, in my opinion, was assumed by the founders of this country that there would be a civic community sector that really had a relationship with the market and the public sector to hold them accountable for making good decisions for the whole community. And what we're finding is that's diminished as the market sector and the public sector have grown. And I think the key to success and the perpetuation of democracy is a rising and well-equipped and enfranchised, not just nonprofit, but the community sector and the civic sector who are working together and with these other sectors. And I think that's going to change and perpetuate our democracy better than anything. I don't think you regulate in the perpetuation of democracy.
All these things you've talked about are great, and I'm going to play again the instigator.
You bet.
Why should someone living in North Fresno or West Fresno, as I live, why should I care about what's going on Blackstone Avenue? So the transportation from downtown to River Park is easier. Every 10 minutes, a bus is going to ride and pick people up and take them to point A and point B. Why should I care?
You know, this is a multidimensional question. It's a multidimensional question. I mean, you can start a high level with this. Look at the changes to the environment in the San Joaquin Valley. You now are experiencing aridity, you know, this dryness that's really troubling, right? And you've just seen a lot of articles about overdrafted the aquifer and the loss of water, and agriculture is such an important industry for us. What if that went away? What if it really did go away over the next 50 to 100 years? Where would these communities be? Well, the city and the government hasn't got enough money to save us. And the market sector doesn't have enough money to save us. And to have the kind of relationships that maintain a social order and opportunity is really going to require us to work together in different ways than we have in the past. I think in Fresno, you have to look at the creeping of urban decay and poverty. If you really, honestly, if you can stay ahead of it and you keep moving north, then you could probably be okay, right? But if you can't afford that, you really ought to be concerned about the opportunities and the prosperity of other people in the community so you protect your own interests.
I would love to continue this conversation with you because I can instigate several other things here, but you know what? We are very, very close to running out of time.
Okay.
I'd like to give you the opportunity now to promote your website, Facebook page, whatever it is that you have.
Well, you can go to www.fresnometmin.org. That's Fresno M-I-N, METMIN.org. But go to Better Blackstone. Google Better Blackstone and just sign up to be notified of events. One thing we didn't get to talk about was our Food to Share program and our food recovery. And we have a brand new website. We're working with 85 recipient organizations and 40 or 50 donors, and we're moving food that otherwise would be wasted into disadvantaged communities. It's a whole other program I didn't talk about, but that's foodtoshare.org. Wonderful program, and I'd really invite people to consider that.
You know what this means? That you're going to have to come back and talk about the Food to Share program.
I would love to come back, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to answer your questions and your instigations and to be here today.
And thank you also for being here, and thank you to the volunteer crew that made this production and every production possible. While we were having this great conversation, they were behind the cameras and in the studio making us look and sound good. Our guest this week was Keith Bergthold. He was with Fresno Metro Ministry. They're doing some very exciting things. Thank you to all of you that are listening to this broadcast on 90.7 FM, KFSR Fresno, and to those watching on Comcast 93 and AT&T 99. We hope you enjoyed the program this week. We were recording out of the beautiful downtown Fresno studios of the Community Media Access Collaborative. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Tune in next week to a new edition.
KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger every Sunday morning at 11:30. For a complete program schedule, visit kfsr.org.